Hey, good morning. My name's Chris Eberlein, and I'm the port captain for Parker Towing Company's Liquid Division. I'm joined here today with David Jones, our senior tankerman and onboard trainer. And today we're going to talk about overhead stripping. Before we begin, we will hold a pre-transfer conference to discuss the task at hand, the equipment we'll be using, and the hazards associated with overhead stripping. I have the SDS here for diesel fuel, which is the cargo we'll be handling today. In the SDS, you'll find hazards associated with the cargo, you'll find the required PPE for the cargo, and you'll also find first aid measures and a lot of other important information. You can find the SDS at the facility where you load the cargo, and you can also be provided an SDS from your shoreside staff. For today's transfer, I want to go over the PPE we'll be using. We've referred to the SDS, and for diesel fuel, at a minimum, we're required to wear steel toe boots, long pants, a long sleeve shirt, safety glasses, and a Type 5 work vest, along with intrinsically safe devices such as his flashlight and/or headlamp should he need one at night. And David also has an H2S monitor on. I have here a full face respirator. Today's cargo does not require a full face respirator, but we have it out here for an example. On your full face respirator, you want to make sure you have the correct cartridges for the product you're handling. You also want to make sure you're clean shaved so you can get a good seal from your respirator. Before we get started, I want to go over some of the hazards associated with overhead stripping. Ideally, we would use the onboard stripping equipment on this barge. However, in the event we have an issue with this onboard system, we need to understand and be prepared to use the overhead stripping process. Hazards associated with overhead stripping include cargo exposure, static electricity accumulation, even weather conditions. And again, these hazards can be found in your SDS, which is typically found in your barge mailbox. Before we get started, I want to go through the equipment we'll be using today. We're on board the MPX 402, and today we'll be pumping out of our number 3 starboard cargo tank. And again, the cargo today is diesel fuel. We'll be using a 2-inch air pump. And first and foremost, before you get started, you want to make sure your equipment is grounded. Here we have a bonding cable going from the pump itself to a good ground point here on the barge. And then on the other end of our hose, on the suction side, we have a grounding cable set up on the tank side. Again, grounding is key here. This is going to help prevent static electricity accumulation and prevent, worst case, a spark. We'll start here at the pump. On the suction side here, we have our connection set up, which are a cam lock connection with safety pins in place. We've inspected the hose to ensure there are no crushes, kinks, or any other damage that could lead to potential leak. And we've also inspected our hoses to ensure we have a good gasket in place on each end. Okay, here at the number 3 starboard tank, we have our stripping wand in place. The stripping wand's been grounded to the tank hatch. You'll see here that we have a ball valve that's closed. We'll leave this valve closed until we're ready to get started. And again, we've checked our connections for proper gaskets and safety pins. Back to the pump here, we have our air supply connected from the vessel, again with a safety pin in place. And we have our discharge hose also set up with safety pins in place, which is leading back to our slop tank. Here on the discharge side of our pump, you can see we have our discharge hose leading into our slop tank. David has secured this hatch with a line to ensure the hose doesn't jump out once we turn on the air. Ideally, we would use a hard connection using cam locks, but in this case, we are going over the hatch, which can be done safely if the proper measures are taken. For this process, you want to ensure you have 2 people. You need a person at the tank to monitor the wand and the cargo level in the tank. And you need a PIC on the discharge end to monitor the hose going into the slop tank. You also want to ensure that you have adequate communication with the vessel and with the PIC you're working with. Here I have a quick action spill kit. In the event we do have a leak to the deck, we are properly prepared. We have a quick action spill kit both on the suction and the discharge end of our pump. Welcome to part 2 of our overhead stripping training video. Today we're going to debrief and cover some of the tasks that we walked through out on the deck of the MPX 402. The first step in the overhead stripping process is to safely ground out our equipment. For this, we'll use a grounding cable which will ground the air pump from the pump to the barge itself, and we'll also use a separate grounding cable which will ground the stripping wand to the stripping location, which in this case would ideally be the tank hatch. Once you have your equipment safely grounded, you can begin your setup. First, you want to place your diaphragm pump and some sort of drip pan or spill containment. In the event you do have a leak, this will prevent a spill to deck. Once you have your pump placed in the drip pan, you can then begin connecting your suction and discharge hoses. When connecting your hoses, you want to ensure you have a gasket in each end of your hose. You also want to ensure you use safety pins at each connection. Once you've hooked up your suction and discharge hoses to the pump, you can then set up your stripping wand. When setting up your stripping wand, it is key to ground out your wand before entering the tank hatch with the stripping wand. Once you have your wand grounded, you can slowly begin to lower the stripping wand down into the cargo tank until it enters the sump of the tank. After setting up the suction end of your hose, you'll then move down to the discharge end of the pump. Again, when connecting hoses, ensure that you have a gasket in each end and you're using your safety pins. Ideally, you would connect the discharge hose to a hard connection, i.e. a stripping tank. However, if you're not able to make a hard connection, you can safely go over the hatch. Keeping in mind you take certain necessary steps. In this case, we're going to be discharging over the hatch. This can be done safely, assuming you take certain precautions. Once we place our discharge hose in the tank hatch, we will secure the tank hatch using lashing cord or some type of line. Once we've ensured we have the correct setup, we will confirm that we have established communications between the vessel and the PIC you'll be working with on your tank barge. Once you've confirmed you have established communication, we can begin the transfer. Confirm with the PIC on the discharge end of the pump that they are ready to receive cargo. Once they confirm they can receive the cargo, you'll then open your ball valve located on your stripping wand. Once you engage the air pump, you want to confirm that you're receiving flow on the discharge end of the pump. All right, David, we have the pump engaged. Just let me know when you start receiving flow.
All right, Roger. Checking for flow. All right, pump moving on this end, hose is jumping, we're receiving.
Roger that. Once you've confirmed you've established flow, you then will continue to monitor the cargo level in the tank as you continue to strip from the sump. Once you've removed all the cargo from the sump, you can then shut down the stripping operation. To do this, you will first communicate with your PIC and the vessel that you have finished the transfer, and you'll be shutting down the air pump. Once you've secured your transfer, you'll then close your ball valve on the stripping wand. Once this is done, it is now time to walk out the suction and discharge hose to remove any remaining cargo that may have been trapped in the hose. Once you've walked out your hose, you can now begin disconnecting your equipment. Should your onboard stripping system fail, you now have the information needed to safely carry out an overhead stripping transfer. Overhead stripping can be done safely if the proper steps are taken and the individual has received the proper training. This concludes our overhead stripping training video. Thank you for watching. Again, if at any time you find yourself unsure of a task at hand, please ask a senior crew member or your shoreside onboard trainer. Thank you.